Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Healthy Hotline, sponsored by Therasage. You know, we're honoring the Lyme community for the entire month of May. And I have Dr. Jay Davidson. Been following Jay forever. We're friends and colleagues for, I want to say, better part of 10 years. I just want to kind of just gloss a little bit about Jay's accomplishments. He's a two-time bestseller author, not just domestically in the US, he's worldwide. He has hosted, and he was sort of a groundbreaker and pioneer before the whole summits and webinars and podcasts really took off. Dr. J was able to understand that communicating to the community through that type of forum was a really effective way to touch a lot of lives. And so the ones that everybody knows him from initially was the Chronic Lyme Disease Summits. And then he did Parasite Summits, which was, again, groundbreaking. And then he also hosted the Viral and Retroviral Summit and the Mitochondrial Summit. So it just gives you a feeling about how diverse Dr. J is in many categories. I have to tell you, and this is just an indication of all the areas that I have marked in his book. And this was my best read, my best bathroom read. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, but I had it there because, you know, sort of like next to the Old Testament and the Bible, Jay's book was one of those books that you could just basically open up to any chapter anywhere and get information that you basically can use today to really change your life. And so now it's moved from the bathroom to my library, and I reflect on this book. And this is a must read for all you guys out there. If you haven't seen it yet, it's not just about Lyme, it's just about general health and the ways to really bring yourself back to health, which is an important topic that we all need, especially in today's COVID days. I would like to say, Dr. J, that you're kind of like what I am to building and developing infrared devices. You're like a serial healthcare entrepreneur. And what's interesting about what's paralleled about us is that you identify the problem and then you are very solution oriented. And that really, I think, was the backbone behind your formulation companies, because you were really offering the public not just identifying the challenge and what to work with and how your physiology works, but really putting it out there, taking risks and developing real unique solutions. Your formulations are my number one go-to by far. And I actually want you to spend a minute or two just telling us some of the unique qualities about your formulations that really separates you from everybody else. So I don't know if I left anything out, Dr. J, but if I did, please inform us as to what kinds of things, what you're up to these days. And then I want to dive into what I think is cogent about today's interview.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your kind intro, as you're just such an amazing person, Robbie. And I think you were on at least 2 of the 4 Lyme summits, I believe, as well, too, that I interviewed you and infrared and all that technology. It's been quite the journey, you know, from pain to purpose, from mess to message. My wife almost dying twice from Lyme disease, to then really putting me on a different path. And I know you're very similar as well, too, in your journey, which is one of the things I think we you know, connected with so many years ago. It's interesting to see you flash that book up, because I'm like, man, I feel like that book is so outdated. So many things that I've learned and we've really been able to figure out in the lab and clinically with people to just bring them to such a different level. But yeah, I'm sure there's still some gems hopefully in there as well. But we, my friend and I, Dr. Todd Watts, started a supplement company, and we have a retail brand called Microbe Formulas, and then we have a practitioner line called CellCore Biosciences. And just from a how did we actually get it started, I actually tried to talk him out of having a supplement company. That's how interested I was in doing this. But then it just happened where my brother's like, you should really partner up with Todd and come out with some better parasite formulas. And that's really where the journey began. So just from a intention standpoint, I'm just always walking the journey and letting, you know, the next step reveal itself in really the greater mission to change people's health. But the big thing with our company, we're not a private label company. We do our own formulations. We do, we are a supplement company, if you will. And we have about 7 scientists right now on our team. So we utilize natural products like fulvic and humic acid, and we actually take extracts of those in specific pieces and can modify and change and add in herbs to that. And essentially our carbon technology helps to, regular herbs that would be for the liver, for instance, helps to protect and deliver them. So that way they're not getting chewed up by stomach acid. They're actually getting to where they need to go. And then also have a pretty advanced area in detoxification in the different chemicals that we're exposed to, from pesticides to, radioactive elements to heavy metals, et cetera. So that's really our big focus is Todd and I, Dr. Watts and I, it's if somebody that is on their deathbed or bedridden, and specifically it actually started in the Lyme community, if they can get well, fully believe anybody else can. And obviously the less symptoms, usually the easier it is, or the faster, if you will, accelerated on getting well. But when you can get the sickest of the sick better and get them moving in the right direction, then you're really, really on the right path. And that's really what our, mission is.
What really attracted me, and we just kind of sidetracked when we were unpacking essentially some of the unique qualities of all your supplements. First off, your binders are crazy great. And we use the binder protocol with our saunas because the sauna basically mobilizes toxin. But what I realized many years ago, it isn't just good enough to mobilize them, because if your body's detox pathways are somewhat impaired or overworked, overburdened, then why not make it a little bit easier on your physiology? And so having a binder, being able to pull, which is like pull that toxin from wherever it is, and then catch it with your formulations, your binders, is just the marriage made in heaven. And then it takes the burden off of your filtering organs, and it allows your detox pathways to open up, give everybody a rest, and really get back into a health positioning mode. But what I really love is that what you just touched on, which I think is so powerful. What makes the difference to me is the way that a supplement can potentiate when your body actually assimilates it and uses it. Many of the supplements that we take, either we don't take enough of them, or we don't take them in the right order, or we take them with food, what time of day, how many hours between, and so a lot of it's wasted. And then even the ones that many supplements, they use excipients, which are kind of like, it's essentially glue, and it doesn't really add anything to the nutritional value. It does fill up the capsule, but it doesn't really do much for the body. You give us 100% of what we're buying, and you use a charged particle that allows your body to assimilate it, because it's carrying essentially the earth charge. And most of our body's charges are kind of off balance and more towards positive charge. So when you introduce a supplement that's got a negative charge to it, there it is. You just get that normal attraction, you get total assimilation. And where we were seeing something like 45 to 50% assimilation or potentiating of a supplement, I'm getting more like 90 to 95% with your supplements. That's even with impaired people with having sluggish systems. So by far, that's a grand slam. I mean, that's knocking the leather off the ball as far as I'm concerned. So let's dive into the essence of today, because there's a full range, and you're so versed on so many things that it's kind of hard to tie you down to one topic or another. So I'm sort of going to let you organically just tell us what's on your mind. What I'm trying to do or achieve is pick your brain a little bit and ask you to speak to the audience out there that could be, like you say, bedridden for a couple, 3 days, or maybe a couple of weeks. And we've seen the full range, or even functioning Lyme patients that, have episodes here and there. What kinds of tips would you give someone? Let's say we'll start with, the more extreme people that, they're sick of being sick, they're bedridden, they're depressed because they don't see any way out. We all know, the Lyme dynamic just doesn't affect the patient. It also affects the surrounding family. It drains their bank accounts. everything about the dynamic is sort of a really negative spiral. And when you get your supplements, when you have a protocol, when you stick to a little game plan, you start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. It makes a really big difference in the psychology and the will to live. And you do it so well in so many ways. So can you give us just a couple of pearls that you would suggest to Lyme patients that might give them inspiration and help them get, move to that next page to start inching back towards that wellness zone?
Absolutely. So from my thought process right now and what's gone on in the last year within the world and this whole, battle of virus type thing that's happened, is we really need to start re-educating ourselves, kind of unlearning and relearning, going back to why are there microorganisms around? And this idea that they're against us and trying to kill us, I believe is incorrect. And I know that can be a little bit of, you want to throw an arrow at me potentially, or you have a fixated, thought process right now. But just before shutting this off, just being able to hear me out and understand, like in the viral side, they're always secondary. They're never a source. They're never the cause. It's always a stressor. And generally that stressor is usually a poison, a toxin. And how much in the last year has toxicity or poison really ever been mentioned? And when we focus just specifically on a virus, for instance, we're never going to get good answers, because a virus is always, like I said, an effect. It's like us thinking that cholesterol is heart disease. No, it's the same analogy would be if I kept showing up at houses that were on fire or buildings that were on fire, and every time I showed up, there was firefighters. And I'm like, what the heck? These guys and gals are starting fires all over the place. And no. That's basically what a virus is. That's basically what a cholesterol is. And when we start looking into other kingdoms like bacteria and fungi, they are decomposers of debris. They are decomposers, biodegraders of poison. They also are, decomposers of basically dying tissue or dead tissue. And so there's actually a purpose. Now, when we shoot into the Lyme side, it's an interesting thing. But just stepping back, the first thing to understand is that the bugs aren't trying to kill you. There is a purpose. There is coherence. There is, actually, what's the best way to say this? I think coherence and really order. There is a thing there. So when we start understanding that, then we start looking at, well, what are the triggers? And why am I feeling like garbage? Why am I not well? And really what it usually comes down to, like I mentioned, is a poison. It's a toxin, or, in scientific terms, a toxicant. It's a synthetic man-made chemical that is impairing the body. And it's a lack of being able to detoxify those chemicals, and it's a buildup of those. And there's clearly exposures we can stop. And then there's other ones where it's just like we live on the planet and we share one atmosphere and we're going to be exposed to it. And so if we start focusing more on what are the toxins we're surrounded by that we can limit those, and then really focus on lifting our body's ability to detoxify, which obviously, sauna fits, into that very well, along with other things like mitochondria and different things. But if we start having that frame of reference, then it's not all about killing the bug. It's not all about, we got to kill this bug. And Dr. J, how do I know when this Lyme disease is completely gone? It's like, is that even the purpose? Because when you have a healthy environment, a healthy terrain, the microbe means nothing. So it's about having the right environment, and the quality of life, the quality of health that we are going to have and are given is based on the quality of questions that we can ask. So if we ask, what is the product that's going to kill Epstein-Barr virus? It's like, well, it's a poor question, because that doesn't matter. Epstein-Barr virus, a virus or an exosome, is just a byproduct of a stressor. It's a byproduct of a poison. It's a byproduct of, fill the blank in. And so when we get down to the core, that is really one of the most critical areas. Now, somebody that's not doing well and bedridden, I'm always going to start almost in the same spot from a protocol standpoint. It's just the more symptoms that you're dealing with right now, and the more fragile you are, the longer that initial period is going to be before you really start to, what we like to say hockey stick, where you start really feeling like you're making progress. And it's with drainage, and it's with mitochondria. So drainage, I like to use the term drainage versus detox. And just defining that, detox is I'm grabbing onto chemicals, I'm pulling them out of the body and clearing those, toxins or toxicants out. Drainage is just the normal pathways that our body moves things through. So for instance, in the sauna world, sweating, that's a drainage pathway. My wife never sweated, if you will. Always just got beat red in the face until she started using an infrared sauna. Then it was like slow and low, that pathway started opening up. Pooping, going number 2, the colon movement is drainage. Liver bile duct, the kidneys, lymphatic system, the brain draining into the lymph, the glymphatic into the lymph, right? These are all what we would term drainage. Now, how I figured this out was basically just jumping into protocols with people. Let's detox them. Let's kill some bugs, Lyme. Let's kill some parasites. And we start figuring out that there's an order. It's like the key to unlock the door of, oh my gosh, now I don't need to have massive symptoms to know that I'm actually making progress. So some people are fine where they're at as far as drainage, but as soon as you start detoxing or pushing detoxification, or you push, eliminating microorganisms or pathogens within the body, then it overloads them and the pathways get clogged up and they can't handle it. Then you get symptoms and you're like, why am I reacting? Why am I, so sensitive? All of a sudden I'm allergic to all these foods. What's happening? It's because the drainage pathways aren't open. So there's an order of drainage that you want to understand. Pooping is even though it's number 2, it's actually the number 1 priority, pun intended on that one. Making sure that the bowels are moving at least, for those that are not feeling good, 2 to 3 times a day, and not watery stools, but make sure the bowels are moving, minimum 1 to 2. But honestly, when people aren't feeling well, I like to err on 2 to 3. And then open up that liver bile duct. When the liver bile ducts are backed up, then what's in literature in the last couple of years that's really come upon us is this blood bile barrier. So our liver detox is phase 1, phase 2, dumps those byproducts into the bile, and that's the drainage of the chemical processing, and clears it out into the stool, and hopefully it leaves the body. When the bile ducts are plugged up or not moving properly, which can happen from glyphosate, it can happen from high estrogen levels, it can happen from high parasites, roundworms will climb up from the GI up into the bile duct, giardia, liver flukes, that's where you get the pain in the liver. Strongyloides is actually a really massive issue because it's got a full life cycle. And those are the people that usually work out and then they feel horrible the next couple of days because they usually live inside the muscle bellies too. But when the body goes to dump the toxins and the bile is backed up, then when it can't dump the byproducts there, it opens up these emergency hatches and pushes it into the blood system. When it goes into the blood, this is where reactions happen. This is what we now know in literature causes issues with the skin, rashes, itching, pruritus is what they call it in the literature, damages endothelial cells of lungs and kidneys. And so if we can just open up drainage at the start, that's one of the biggest keys. And then I always talk about a drainage funnel, that there's a priority and you want to, open the bottom up and work your way up on the funnel. But just understand the whole idea of this drainage funnel is that it's got a power switch. And the power switch is the mitochondria. If your mitochondria just don't have any support, any life in them, it doesn't matter what herbs you take to turn on the liver or turn on the colon, like the power switch isn't going to those cells. So you got to flip the power switch on along with then supporting the organs in the proper order. And that's really key, no matter how severe or, well you feel. I always start with that process, because when you start with that process, and if you feel not a lot of symptoms, it can be a short process, and then you just still support it through your journey. The more significant, sensitive, severe symptoms, the longer I usually stay in there, the slower, lower, and then, usually more support through the journey of, the next steps.
Wow. Unreal. That's amazing. That's a whole thesis right there. I loved the way you focused on the shift of thinking, because I think the Western model is, that identify the enemy just like you're at war, and then go out and attack it. And I believe very strongly in just what you talked about, in a sense, the balance of the organisms inside of us, the symbiotic relationships, how they all live together in somewhat harmony. And really what happens when what we see is that it's the imbalance when you have a suppressed immune system for whatever reason, and then there's an overgrowth of one population or another, because we all have a little pneumonia, we all have a little Epstein-Barr, we all have a little cancer in us. This is just all part of a normal process. And so just focusing on the balance or rebalancing your internal environment is where I believe that most of where it should go. And I love starting with just opening up that detox pathway, those detox pathways that you identified. Also, when you have a chronic Lyme patient that has, maybe been carrying the whole internal process for many years, there's this kind of what I feel like an unrealized expectation among the Lyme community that they could take a magic pill and then they're instantly going to feel better. You can't. What I found was that toxicity and inflammation, they sort of travel on the same highway. And so you identified like many ways that we can be toxic, and also how that relates to inflammation, which then relates to some kind of symptom. And I think that most Lyme patients out there, they are symptomatic because they're toxic, because they've been carrying all this imbalance of microbial activity in their bodies, and they've been clogged up, bottlenecked. And so if we can create a stronger foundation of detox pathway, and then supplement the body with maybe some of the nutritional deficiencies that the organisms have drained from them, so support the cells and tissues. Many of them are the supplements that you guys have developed. Then we sort of have a fighting chance of rebalancing your internal environment. And if you make it healthy environment for yourself, but not healthy to support the imbalance, then you're back to the road to recovery. And I think that, if depending on how symptomatic, the expectation should be, if it takes 10 or 15 or 20 years, the younger you are when you get, affected somehow or infected somehow, you may carry that Lyme imbalance for 10, 20 years. And all of a sudden, you have a change in job, a change in home, a change in marriage, something changes that puts that emotional component in, suppresses your immune system, or maybe even a physical activity like a car accident or something. And then there's that tipping point. Now, all of a sudden, you wake up one day and you're symptomatic, right? And then, of course, we haven't talked about this, but what I've noticed is when a Lyme patient gets exposed to mold, oh my God, they go from functional to non-functional almost overnight. But it's really just addressing those families and the imbalances. And I think that if you have a realistic expectation that if it takes a while to build up the symptom, it should also take a while to sort of walk down that toxic mountain. And, it's hard to fall up a mountain, right? So when you're getting toxic, you're basically climbing the mountain. But if you go too fast coming down the mountain, you can easily trip and fall. And that's why I love the low and slow, approach. So I kind of fashion it to like learning how to swim. If I was your swimming coach and you never swam before and you were fearful of drowning, I wouldn't throw you into the deep end, say, I'm going to go for half an hour, grab a latte, and expect you to survive. So just depending on how symptomatic, putting a little toe in the water, just starting off and seeing how your body responds. Listen to that internal voice inside of you that says it's going on, you're on track. And if not, check in with your provider that, can fine tune your protocol that is most appropriate for you. So the array of things that you've developed in your supplement lines is good for everybody. And particularly, I think, in what you've done with I almost want to say an army, because in a short period of time, you've amassed an amazing amount of intellect in terms of health providers that advocate for your product line. So it's not just that you've developed the supplement, but you go to great lengths to educate all of your providers to be able to instruct their patients how to use it to get the most benefit. It's all about optimal health. So you're amazing. That's all I can say. Keep on keeping on. So we talked about some pretty important things. Any other pearls that you'd like that resonate for you that you feel like you need to share today?
Yeah, it's Lyme's never by itself. Usually what you find in the Lyme community is that there's all these other infections and co-infections that they would say going on. And what it usually amounts to is that there's an actual immune system dysfunction that is then insinuated based on other problems going on. So it's always a cumulative effect. So we so often, like you mentioned, want to, what is the one thing that I got to figure out? What is the one thing I got to do? When it's, somebody going through this, and I'm speaking from, as a spouse of my wife that almost lost her life twice to what we believe, was Lyme disease, and her struggles from that is they are all learning lessons. And the moment that we understand that everything around us and everything that's going on with us, if you will, is actually happening for us rather than this idea. There's such a victim mentality of why is this happening to me when really it's happening for me. And I understand when you're not feeling good, like you're in that place, you're in that moment, but just know coming out is really important. And it's just putting the pieces together. So I'm always a big fan of starting with mitochondria and drainage, and then going after the gut. And specifically with the gut, we're looking at parasites, and eliminating the parasites, because parasites are there again as a byproduct of the environment. The more poisons that you have in your body, in your gut, the more you're going to have a parasite problem, because they're there to be a sponge for toxins. They're there to try to biodegrade them. So again, it comes back to what's our terrain, what's our environment, what's our body like. And so we generally understand, oh, toxins are a big thing, and we just want to jump in and detox everything. It's like there's a process. You want to open up drainage pathways. You want to support mitochondria. You want to start bringing the pathogen levels down. And first of all, even if you have Lyme or co-infections, parasites are always priority because they're the biggest. Because even Dr. Alan McDonald has found that Lyme disease can live safely within parasites inside of nematodes. So let's say you have Lyme bacteria that you're trying to eliminate. You need to really peel back all the shields that this bacteria will use. And one of them is parasites. That's why parasites is so critical within that. So cleansing those and then going systemic, because parasites are not just in the gut, they are throughout the body. And then once you really open up drainage, support mitochondria, and that's going to come along with you for the journey. And the more symptoms you have and the more, how would I say, fragile or sensitive you are, the more you need to support those along the journey. But as you're cleansing parasites, gut, you go systemic, then that opens you up into doing detoxification. And you might be saying, well, where does Lyme fit into this? It's like, well, understand heavy metals are used for biofilm formation of Lyme disease. So it's like if you have toxic heavy metals and haven't detoxed, again, that's just a shielding mechanism. Why do we want to try to, let's say Lyme is inside of a castle and we have all these different walls and different things to try to get through, when we could just literally basically knock all the walls down, and then you got this, Lyme bug, if you will, all like, okay, I got nowhere to protect anymore. What do I do? Then it becomes a lot easier, if you will, in taking care of it. So Lyme is one of the last things generally to do, as much as people, want to just really jump into it. You're going to react and you're not going to get long-term results. So it's really about drainage, mitochondria, going into parasites, then going systemic parasites, then detoxifying the body. And we need to grab onto chemicals. And as much as toxic heavy metals get some attention, honestly, it's not even the biggest thing. It's the herbicides and pesticides. And it's also these persistent organic pollutants that are out there that are especially in our water supply, and radioactive elements that are just, they just tear apart our mitochondria. So there's so many chemicals that are out there. I just saw an article actually yesterday published in a journal saying they discovered 101 or 110 new chemicals, and 55 of them, they have no idea where they came from. They have no way to be like, where did these things come from? We have so many chemicals within our society and toxins that's really where the focus needs to be, rather than this whole germaphobe, everything's out to kill me. I have to sanitize. I can't be by anybody. I have to, spray my hands with all this, all these chemicals all the time. It's like, in the long run, that's actually making you worse. And having the fear of that the environment's out to kill you is also another bad thing. So just framing it that as long as we can proceed in the right order, you're going to get results. As long as we can get down to the deep source and sources of what's holding you back, you can get results, which means you can really change and transform your life. Now, does that mean that things that are going on physically with the body don't matter? No. Does that mean that the mental, emotional baggage and traumas we've dealt with and held on to in the past don't matter? Heck no. I mean, that's like the Pandora box. You know, we need to go within and start realizing that, again, these things that have happened in the past or that are occurring now, they're not to us, they're for us. And that's a big pill to swallow. That's a big step to get up. So we take one step at a time. We just keep moving forward. And as long as we do that, you know, our lives are going to change.
You know, I'm so happy that you touched on the emotional piece, because everybody talks about mind body, but no one really addresses it. And I don't believe that in my heart, that you can really heal completely unless you really address the emotional part of it, and however that weaves in. And oftentimes it comes from the patient. They've got their own baggage in a sense, and then they've got their family and support systems around them that are also bringing fear into the room because they don't want their child or their family member to be afflicted. They oftentimes, and just like with you experienced with your wife and me with my daughter, we would rather take the bullet than have our spouses and child have that challenge, you know? And so there's a whole sort of system and dynamic that feeds into one another. It's hard to break out of that. But there are some simple ways. And, you know, we both can probably speak to how once you get the body in, and I almost feel like when you were talking, it's almost like we lost our way, like our GPS systems inside with all this epigenetic and exogenous frequencies and things that we're surrounded with in our modern world. The GPS is turned off, and so many of the internal beautiful mechanisms that our deliverers have given us aren't really in sync anymore. But once you start to tune them up or get the lights turned back on, it's remarkable how quickly the body reacts. And so you touched on it a little earlier when you talked about exponential healing. And so it's the foundation part, like any foundation, might take a while to build, to get a strong one. But then after that, when you start building the little Legos on top of that foundation, it's almost like watching or listening to an orchestra tuning up, because the body will move in such exponential ways to try to heal and get back on course, because it has memory. Cells have memory, and your body, different functional parts of your body have memory. And so they just lost their way. And I so really appreciate you spending time in your busy world to share these thoughts with us. You're amazing, Dr. J. For all of you out there that want to get a hold of Dr. J, besides his two companies, CellCore and
Microbe Formulas.
Microbe Formulas. I'm always focusing on CellCore because that's, you know, I guess for some reason it's a professional brand, but you really approach both the public and the professionals. So you can get to Dr. J besides his companies. And if you go on either one of those sites, it's all about information. He shows his protocols. There's no secrets here. He's completely transparent because, like myself, I think Dr. J. Davidson is a pioneer in the educational point of view. He wants to make sure that everybody understands why they're doing what they're doing and what they're getting involved with to really kind of get their head around and understand what real healthcare is all about. You can get to Dr. J on his website, which is Dr. J Davison, spelled just like it sounds, DrJayDavidson.com. And it's going to be as brilliant as all the other ones. Dr. J, as usual, you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your thoughts with us. I'm sure everybody out there got one pearl. I think there's 20. I just was writing a list here, and I can't believe how many things you shared with us. But more importantly, you know, take a step back, understand that the healing process is a process. Get a game plan, stick to the game plan, and then just see it through and just watch, you know, your body tune up. It's really miraculous. So always a pleasure, Jay. I'm a big supporter and fan of you and everything you're doing. And can't wait to hook up with you again soon. And all my best to you and your family, your community, and everything you're doing these days.
Thanks, Robbie. Right back at you. And just for the listener, you know, if you feel like you're hitting a wall, oftentimes life, you know, the big guy upstairs, source, heaven, whatever you want to focus on. It's the more stubborn you are and you're set that life has to be this way, generally the louder the signals and the louder the, you know, symptoms come. So sometimes there's just a point where you just like, okay, what's the purpose of this? Take a step back, take a deep breath, and you're gonna get through it.
Cool. Well, you gave me hope. And I'm sure you gave a lot of people out there in the full range of Lyme community, Lyme families, the patient themselves, something to really hang their hats on today. Jay, you're amazing. Have an awesome day, weekend, and God bless you for everything you're doing.
Hey everybody, it's Robbie Bessner. Thanks so much for joining us today. Please share this content with anyone that you think might benefit from it, and we're looking forward to having you with us tomorrow for another great interview.